What happens when an Oscar-winning actress, known for her powerful voice on justice and equality, sits across the table from a former White House communications director with very different views? Live on daytime television. Make sure to subscribe to the Star Talks and like and comment for more talk show coverage. The cameras pan across the table, the familiar theme music fades, and the audience at the View applauds as Viola Davis steps onto the stage. She's smiling, poised, confident. The kind of presence that fills the room before she even says a word. Alyssa Farah Griffin is already seated at the table with the other hosts, papers neatly stacked in front of her, posture straight, expression polite but measured. Joy leans forward first. "We are so excited to have you here. Academy Award winner, producer, best-selling author, Viola Davis." The audience erupts again. Viola nods graciously. "Thank you. It's good to be here." Whoopi smiles at her. "You've never been one to shy away from speaking your mind." Viola chuckles lightly. "I try not to." The conversation begins comfortably enough. They talk about her latest project, a film centered around resilience and systemic inequality. Viola speaks passionately about storytelling. "When I choose roles," she explains, "I'm thinking about who doesn't get to be seen, who doesn't get to be heard." Sunny nods in agreement. "That's why your work hits so hard." Alyssa smiles politely. "It's undeniable that your performances are powerful." There's a brief pause, subtle but noticeable. Alyssa continues. "I do wonder, though, when Hollywood takes on social issues. Do you ever worry it becomes more about messaging than about bringing people together?" The audience murmurs softly. Viola turns toward her, expression still calm. "What do you mean by that?" Alyssa keeps her tone measured. "I just think sometimes audiences feel talked at, especially when politics get involved." Joy raises her eyebrows. "Oh boy." Whoopi glances sideways but lets it play out. Viola folds her hands gently on the table. "If telling the truth about people's lived experiences feels political, that says more about the discomfort than the message." The audience claps. Alyssa nods slightly. "But not everyone experiences the same America. Some people feel alienated when they hear that the country is fundamentally broken." Viola's smile fades, not angrily but thoughtfully. "I don't think acknowledging pain means calling something broken beyond repair," she says. "It means we care enough to fix it." Sunny jumps in. "Exactly." Alyssa interjects gently. "But sometimes the language used suggests that the entire system is irredeemable. That's where I think some viewers tune out." Viola tilts her head. "Are we talking about viewers tuning out, or people being uncomfortable?" The audience reacts, a mix of applause and murmurs. Alyssa straightens slightly. "I'm talking about the country feeling divided. I think rhetoric matters. And silence matters too," Viola replies softly. There's a split-second pause at the table. Whoopi leans back, watching closely. Alyssa maintains composure. No one is advocating silence. Viola's voice stays steady. "When marginalized people speak honestly about their experience, they're often told to soften it, to make it more digestible." Joy nods emphatically. "That's true." Alyssa shakes her head gently. "I'm not saying soften. I'm saying unify." Viola leans forward just slightly. "Unity without truth isn't unity. It's performance." The audience applauds louder this time. Alyssa presses her lips together before responding. "But truth is subjective sometimes." There's an audible reaction from the crowd. Viola's expression sharpens, but her tone remains controlled. "Facts aren't subjective." Sunny gives a quick, quiet mem. Alyssa responds quickly. "I'm not denying facts. I'm saying perspective shapes how we interpret them." Viola holds her gaze. Perspective doesn't erase reality. The tension is now palpable, not explosive but present. Whoopi finally steps in lightly. "All right, ladies." But Viola continues calmly. "When you grow up in poverty, when you experience racism, when you struggle to access opportunity, that's not perspective. That's lived truth." The audience applauds again. Alyssa nods, choosing her words carefully. "I don't dispute your lived experience. I respect it. I just think if we constantly frame America as oppressive, we risk losing the progress we've made." Viola exhales slowly. "Progress doesn't mean finished." Joy claps lightly on the table. "There it is." Alyssa responds, a bit more firmly now. "But do you acknowledge that this country has also created opportunity? Including for you?" The room shifts. Viola's expression tightens, not offended, but deeply focused. "Yes," she says. "I acknowledge opportunity. I also acknowledge that I had to fight for every inch of it." The audience goes quiet, listening. And I shouldn't have had to fight that hard, she adds. Sunny nods slowly. Alyssa leans in. But that fight is part of the American story. People from all backgrounds struggle and overcome. Viola doesn't look away. Struggle is universal. Systemic barriers are not. A ripple moves through the audience. Whoopi raises a hand gently. Okay. But Alyssa continues, her tone still controlled but more assertive. I think when we use words like systemic in broad strokes, it can make people defensive who don't see themselves as part of a problem. Viola's response is immediate but measured. If someone feels defensive hearing about inequality, maybe they should ask why. The audience reacts audibly. Joy says under her breath, Hom. Alyssa's jaw tightens just slightly. Or maybe they feel blamed for things they didn't personally do. Viola softens her tone, almost compassionate. This isn't about personal guilt. It's about collective responsibility. The applause is louder now. Whoopi steps in with a small smile. That's a big conversation for a Tuesday morning. The audience laughs nervously. But the air hasn't fully cleared. Alyssa looks toward Viola again. I just worry that constant focus on systemic injustice can overshadow stories of unity and shared values. Viola answers quietly but firmly. Unity cannot exist without justice. There's a beat of silence. The audience claps, not explosively but steadily. Alyssa inhales slightly, glancing briefly at her notes before looking back up. So how do we move forward, she asks, without deepening divides. Viola doesn't hesitate. By listening. By believing people when they tell you what they've lived. Sunny nods again. That's it. Alyssa gives a small, tight smile. And what if their experience challenges your worldview? Viola's eyes don't waver. Then maybe your worldview needs to expand. The audience gasps lightly, then applauds. Whoopi lets out a slow breath. All right, we're going to take a quick break. But as the music starts to cue softly in the background, the camera catches the table. Viola remains calm, composed. Alyssa sits upright, still poised, but clearly processing. The tension isn't explosive. It's intellectual, personal, real. As the screen fades toward commercial, you can feel it. This isn't just a polite disagreement. It's building. The music fades back in and the camera returns to the table. The applause is a little louder than usual, not celebratory but charged. You can feel the audience leaning in. Whoopi smiles professionally. We're back with Viola Davis. Before the break, we were having a very lively conversation. A few audience members laugh knowingly. Viola nods calmly, hands folded on the table again. Alyssa sits upright, shoulders squared, her expression composed but serious. Joy jumps in first. Well, this is what this table is for. Different perspectives. Sunny adds, and real ones. Alyssa gives a brief nod. Absolutely. And I want to be clear, I'm not dismissing anyone's lived experience. Viola turns slightly toward her. I didn't say you were dismissing it. Alyssa exhales lightly. I just think sometimes when we talk about systemic injustice, there's an implication that America is uniquely flawed in a way that ignores how far we've come. The audience murmurs again. Viola's tone remains even. America is extraordinary in many ways, but its greatness doesn't exempt it from critique. Joy snaps her fingers softly. Say that again. Alyssa tilts her head. Critique is fair. I'm all for accountability. But sometimes the rhetoric makes it sound like the system is designed only to oppress. Viola leans forward slightly, voice steady. For some people, it was. There's an audible shift in the room. Alyssa doesn't look away. Historically, yes. But today, Viola's expression sharpens just a touch. You don't think history echoes into today? Sunny interjects gently. Policies don't just vanish. Alyssa responds quickly. But we've passed civil rights legislation. We've had enormous social change. Viola nods. And yet disparities still exist. Alyssa gestures with one hand. Disparities can have multiple causes: economic, cultural, educational. Viola replies without raising her voice. And systemic. The word hangs in the air again. Joy leans back, whispering, here we go. Whoopi lets it continue. Alyssa presses forward, still measured. I think sometimes the word systemic gets used as a blanket explanation. Viola's eyebrows lift slightly. When patterns persist across generations, across institutions, across geography, that's not a blanket. That's a structure. The audience applauds, louder this time. Alyssa pauses, absorbing that. But how do we talk about that without discouraging personal responsibility? Viola doesn't hesitate. Acknowledging barriers doesn't erase responsibility. It explains why the starting lines aren't equal. Sunny nods emphatically. Exactly. Alyssa leans in a bit more now, her tone slightly firmer. But constantly emphasizing inequality can create a sense of hopelessness. Viola shakes her head gently. Naming a problem is the first step to solving it. Silence creates hopelessness. The audience claps again. There's a noticeable tightening in Alyssa's posture. She's still calm, but more pointed. I just worry, she says carefully, that when public figures frame America primarily through injustice, it fuels division. Viola's response comes slower this time, more deliberate. Division existed before we started talking about it. A few people in the audience say, hum. Alyssa counters, but do you believe the country is fundamentally fair? Viola looks directly at her. I believe the country has the potential to be fair. That answer lands differently. The applause is thoughtful, not explosive. Alyssa nods slightly. That's something we agree on. There's a small release of tension, but it doesn't last. Joy jumps in, almost playfully. See, progress. The audience laughs lightly, but Alyssa continues. However, I think it's important to recognize that many Americans don't see themselves as oppressors. They feel attacked when the narrative suggests complicity. Viola's tone softens, but her words are firm. This isn't about labeling individuals as villains. It's about acknowledging systems that benefit some more than others. Alyssa responds quickly. But when you say benefit, it implies intent. Viola shakes her head. No, it implies impact. There's a beat. Sunny leans forward. Intent and impact are not the same. The audience claps again. Alyssa nods slowly, but there's a flash of frustration in her eyes. I understand that distinction. But politically, language matters. Words like systemic can alienate people who might otherwise support reform. Viola inhales deeply. If someone is alienated by the word systemic, maybe they need to ask why that word feels threatening. The audience reacts, louder this time. Whoopi raises a hand slightly. Let's keep it respectful. Viola nods immediately. Of course. Alyssa maintains eye contact. It's not about being threatened. It's about feeling painted with a broad brush. Viola's voice remains calm, but more pointed. The brush exists because the pattern exists. There's a brief silence at the table. Joy whispers, oh my. Alyssa shifts slightly in her chair. But do you think there's room for acknowledging both systemic issues and individual progress? Viola nods. Absolutely. I am the product of both. The audience quiets to listen. I've achieved things I never imagined, Viola continues. But that doesn't erase the obstacles I faced because of who I am. Alyssa asks carefully, and do you believe those obstacles still define America today? Viola answers steadily. They influence it. Sunny jumps in. There's data to support that. Alyssa raises her hand slightly, not to interrupt aggressively, but to reclaim space. Data also shows improvement over time. Viola nods. Improvement doesn't mean completion. The repetition lands harder this time. Alyssa exhales through her nose, almost imperceptibly. So what's the solution? Viola pauses. Honest conversation. Policy change. Investment in communities. Listening without defensiveness. Alyssa tilts her head. And where does personal accountability fit into that? Viola responds calmly. Everywhere. But accountability must apply to institutions too. The audience applauds again. The energy is no longer just intellectual. It's emotional. Alyssa's tone shifts slightly. Do you think conservatives can be part of that solution? Viola doesn't hesitate. Anyone willing to confront truth can. That draws mixed reactions, some applause, some murmurs. Alyssa nods, but presses further. And who decides what that truth is? Viola's answer is immediate. Evidence. History. Lived experience. Alyssa counters softly, but lived experience varies. Viola holds her gaze. Yes, and some experiences have historically been ignored. The room goes quiet again. Whoopi looks between them. This is why these conversations matter. Joy chimes in. It's uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Alyssa folds her hands together. I agree conversations are necessary. I just don't want them to become accusatory. Viola's voice lowers slightly, not angry, but deeply sincere. It feels accusatory when we're used to comfort. There's a collective inhale from the audience. Alyssa blinks, absorbing that. So you're saying discomfort is required? Viola nods slowly. Growth is uncomfortable. The applause is sustained now. Alyssa offers a tight smile. I don't disagree with growth. But Joy teases. Alyssa sighs lightly. But I think the framing matters. If the message feels like condemnation, people shut down. Viola responds, if people shut down instead of listening, that's a choice. That lands heavy. Whoopi leans forward. All right, but Alyssa doesn't back away. And if people feel attacked, they're less likely to support change. Viola's tone is unwavering. Change has never waited for comfort. The audience reacts strongly, applause, a few gasps. The tension at the table is unmistakable now. It's not shouting. It's not chaos. It's two intelligent, composed women refusing to retreat. Alyssa's voice is steady but firm. I think we both want a better country. Viola nods. I believe that. Then maybe, Alyssa says carefully, we should focus on what unites us. Viola pauses for a long moment. Justice unites us, she says quietly. The room goes still. And for the first time, Alyssa doesn't immediately respond. The silence says more than any raised voice could. The silence lingers for a few seconds after Viola says, justice unites us. You can feel the audience holding its breath. Whoopi clears her throat gently. All right, let's unpack that. Alyssa shifts in her chair, hands clasped together on the table now. Her tone is still controlled, but there's a sharper edge than before. I agree justice is important. I just think we may define it differently. Viola nods slowly. That's fair. Sunny leans forward. So how do you define it? Alyssa answers carefully. Equal treatment under the law. Equal opportunity. A system that doesn't favor one group over another. Viola responds almost immediately. Equal opportunity requires equal access. A small ripple of applause moves through the crowd. Alyssa replies, and we have laws that protect equal access. Viola's expression remains calm, but her eyes sharpen slightly. Laws don't always translate into lived reality. The audience reacts again, not loud but present. Joy jumps in. That's been proven historically. Alyssa turns slightly toward Joy. And historically we've corrected those injustices. Viola nods once. Corrected some. Not all. Alyssa's voice grows firmer. But if we keep framing the country as structurally unjust, how do we foster pride or unity? Viola doesn't hesitate. Pride that ignores truth is fragile. There's an audible "oh" from someone in the audience. Whoopi raises her eyebrows. All right now. Alyssa leans forward. I'm not saying ignore truth. I'm saying balance it. Viola tilts her head slightly. Balance can't mean dilution. Sunny softly says, exactly. Alyssa glances at Sunny, then back at Viola. But constant emphasis on systemic barriers can make young people feel powerless. Viola's tone lowers, becoming more personal. What makes young people feel powerless is experiencing barriers and being told they don't exist. The audience claps more forcefully now. Alyssa's jaw tightens for a moment before she responds. I'm not denying barriers exist. Viola keeps her gaze steady. Then what are we debating? There's a brief, uncomfortable pause. Alyssa answers honestly. The scale. The framing. The implication. Viola nods slightly. So you're concerned about tone. Alyssa exhales. Yes. Tone matters. Viola's reply is calm but piercing. Tone policing has historically been used to silence difficult truths. The audience reacts loudly, applause mixed with murmurs. Whoopi leans in quickly. Okay, let's keep this constructive. Alyssa sits up straighter. I'm not policing tone. I'm asking whether messaging can bring more people in instead of pushing them away. Viola doesn't raise her voice. If someone feels pushed away by the truth, maybe they need to examine why. Alyssa responds immediately, a hint of frustration creeping in. Or maybe they don't see the situation the same way. Viola nods. Then they should listen to those who do. The tension is thicker now. No one's smiling. Joy folds her arms, watching closely. Sunny looks back and forth between them. Alyssa's tone becomes more pointed. Listening goes both ways. Viola pauses. Then she nods slowly. You're right. It does. There's a slight easing, but only slightly. Alyssa continues. So are you open to the idea that some Americans genuinely believe the system works for most people? Viola answers carefully. It may work for most. That doesn't mean it works for all. Applause again. Alyssa presses further. But no system works perfectly. Viola replies, imperfection is different from inequity. That line lands hard. The audience reacts audibly. Whoopi mutters softly. That's a distinction. Alyssa folds her hands tighter. Do you believe America is more unjust than other countries? Viola smiles faintly, not amused but measured. Comparisons don't absolve responsibility. Sunny nods. Exactly. Alyssa shakes her head slightly. But context matters. Viola responds. Accountability matters more. The exchange is quick now, almost rhythmic. Alyssa's composure holds, but her voice is firmer. I think constantly focusing on systemic injustice risks erasing the progress made by millions of Americans who've worked hard. Viola leans forward slightly. Acknowledging injustice doesn't erase progress. It honors the struggle that created it. The audience applauds again, louder this time. Alyssa's expression shifts, less defensive, more direct. Do you think conservatives don't care about justice? Viola answers without hesitation. I think justice requires confronting uncomfortable realities. Alyssa nods once. That didn't answer my question. Viola meets her gaze. I think anyone, conservative or liberal, who refuses to acknowledge inequity is avoiding part of the truth. The room is completely quiet now. Joy whispers, wow. Alyssa takes a breath. That feels like an accusation. Viola responds softly. It's an observation. The audience gasps lightly. Whoopi raises her hand. All right. But Alyssa isn't backing down. You're implying avoidance. Viola keeps her voice steady. When data shows disparities in healthcare, education, criminal justice, and we minimize systemic causes, that's avoidance. Sunny nods firmly. There are studies on that. Alyssa counters quickly. There are also studies showing improvement and narrowing gaps. Viola responds. Improvement doesn't negate existence. The repetition hits again, stronger now. Alyssa exhales, visibly trying to stay composed. I feel like every point I make gets reframed as resistance. Viola softens slightly. I'm not questioning your intentions. Alyssa looks directly at her. It feels like you are. The audience goes quiet again. Viola pauses, longer this time. That's not my goal, she says calmly. My goal is to make sure the conversation doesn't minimize real pain. Alyssa's voice lowers. And my goal is to make sure the conversation doesn't alienate people who might otherwise agree. There it is, the core divide. Sunny interjects gently. Maybe both things can be true. Joy nods. That's usually the case. Viola looks at Alyssa. I don't want alienation. I want awareness. Alyssa responds. Awareness can feel like accusation. Viola replies. Growth often feels uncomfortable. The audience applauds again, but it's less explosive, more contemplative. Alyssa's shoulders drop slightly, as if releasing some tension. Do you think there's room for optimism in this conversation? Viola smiles faintly. Absolutely. Alyssa looks surprised. Because it hasn't felt that way. Viola's tone shifts, warmer now. I'm here because I believe change is possible. If I didn't, I wouldn't speak. That softens the energy at the table. The audience applauds gently. Alyssa nods slowly. So we agree on hope. Viola nods back. We do. There's a small pause, not hostile this time, just reflective. Whoopi smiles slightly. See, that's what I'm talking about. But the conversation isn't fully resolved. Alyssa leans in one more time. I just think language matters in how we pursue that hope. Viola responds quietly. And honesty matters in how we sustain it. The two women hold eye contact for a long moment. No one interrupts. No one laughs. The tension hasn't exploded. It's deep and layered, complex, real. And the audience knows they're witnessing something that feels less like TV and more like truth colliding in real time. There's a long pause after Viola says, and honesty matters in how we sustain it. You can almost hear the studio lights humming. Whoopi looks between them, then leans slightly toward the camera. This is why we have this table. Different perspectives. Passionate voices. The audience applauds, not wildly but respectfully. Alyssa gives a small nod. And I appreciate the dialogue, even when it's uncomfortable. Viola nods back. Especially when it's uncomfortable. A faint ripple of laughter breaks some of the tension. Joy exhales dramatically. I need a commercial break after that. The audience laughs louder this time, grateful for the release. But Alyssa turns back to Viola once more, her tone less sharp now, more reflective. I want to say this clearly. I don't question your sincerity. I don't question your experiences. I just worry about how these conversations land in a country that already feels fractured. Viola listens carefully before responding. And I hear that. I really do. But fracture doesn't heal by pretending it's not there. The audience murmurs in agreement. Alyssa nods slowly. No, but it also doesn't heal by constantly reopening wounds without offering solutions. Viola answers gently. Talking about a wound is the first step to treating it. Sunny adds quietly, and ignoring it leads to infection. That gets a mix of soft laughter and applause. Alyssa smiles faintly at that, tension easing just a bit. I think where we differ is in how we frame the treatment. Viola nods. Maybe. Whoopi steps in before it can escalate again. And that's okay. We're not here to agree on everything. Joy points toward the audience. They'd be bored if we did. Laughter again. The energy has shifted. It's no longer sharp, it's reflective. But the weight of the exchange is still hanging in the air. Whoopi turns to Viola. Before we wrap, what do you want people at home to take away from this? Viola pauses, choosing her words carefully. I want people to listen, not to react, not to defend, just to listen, especially to voices that have historically been pushed aside. The audience applauds, steady and sincere. Whoopi turns to Alyssa. And you? Alyssa nods. I want people to engage without assuming the worst about each other. We can disagree without being enemies. More applause. Viola looks at her. I agree with that. It's subtle, but it matters. Whoopi smiles. See? Common ground. The show moves toward its closing segment. The applause sign flashes briefly, and the audience claps as the conversation transitions to lighter announcements. But even as the cameras begin to pull back, you can see both women still processing. Viola sits upright, calm, composed, but thoughtful. Alyssa glances down at her notes briefly, then back up, her expression serious, but not hostile. The credits start to roll. Whoopi thanks Viola for coming. We appreciate you being here. Viola smiles warmly. Thank you for having me. The applause swells as the camera fades out. But that's not where the story ends. Within minutes of the episode airing, clips start circulating online. Short segments of the exchange, especially the lines, "Unity without truth isn't unity," and "Imperfection is different from inequity," begin trending. On social media, reactions pour in. Some viewers praise Viola for her composure, calling her measured, powerful, and unapologetically honest. Others defend Alyssa, saying she asked fair questions and represented viewers who feel left out of these conversations. Comment sections explode with debate. Some users write that this is exactly what daytime television should look like. Difficult conversations handled without shouting. Others argue that the tension revealed just how divided the country still is. Hashtags connected to both women trend for hours. Political commentators weigh in. Entertainment blogs run headlines about the tense exchange. Clips are dissected frame by frame, body language analyzed, tone scrutinized. By the end of the day, the segment has millions of views across platforms. Behind the scenes, sources say there was no dramatic fallout after the cameras stopped. No shouting backstage. No icy silence. In fact, according to staff, Viola and Alyssa exchanged a few quiet words off camera, respectful, calm, professional. They didn't suddenly agree. But they didn't walk away angry either. Producers reportedly felt the conversation represented exactly what the show aims to do: present different perspectives and let them breathe. The following day, other media outlets referenced the exchange, debating whether it was confrontation or conversation. Some say it was a clash. Others say it was growth in action. And that's what makes it powerful. Not because someone won, not because someone lost, but because neither woman backed down, and neither resorted to disrespect. It was layered, emotional, real. Two strong voices navigating a complex issue in real time. And that's what stayed with viewers long after the applause faded. Now we want to hear from you. Was Viola right that justice must come before unity? Was Alyssa right that tone and framing matter just as much as message? Did this conversation move the needle or deepen the divide? Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to the Star Talks for more real talk show stories.